and that's in the Big Ten. Ohio State heading to Penn State. And I'm so excited for this game. I wrote a column that ran at On3 yesterday about, remember the speech James Franklin gave 6 years ago after they lost by 1 to Ohio State at home, where he said, the difference between good and great and elite is just this much. And they're at great and they're trying to get to elite. And he promised they'd get to elite and they haven't gotten there yet. But it feels like they might be able to take that step if they can beat Ohio State Saturday.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And, it's kind of an interesting thought because there were some people who were reacting on Twitter to your column about how James Franklin gets to make the statement like 10 years into his coaching tenure there. And, it is an important game for James Franklin, not because I think everything is forgiven, but if he wins this, I think that the view of him as Penn State's coach completely and dramatically shifts. Like whenever I read Stuart Mandel and Bruce Feldman's coaching rankings list, they disagree all the time on where James Franklin should be. And Bruce usually has James Franklin pretty high because of what he did at Vanderbilt. But I've always struggled with where I would put him because I don't know that I can ever have a coach who's at a place that wants to win the Big Ten not ever winning it outside of one time in his tenure that high on the list. But if he is able to prove Saturday that he built a Penn State team that can beat the juggernaut that Ohio State is supposed to be, and I think there's a very good chance of that happening, then I think that kind of rewires your brain on how to view Penn State and how to view him as the coach of that program.
Yeah. And remember, they won the Big Ten in 2016. They beat Ohio State last in 2016. So it's been 8 years. They've not played for the Big Ten title since then. Now, a lot of that is being boxed out in the division by either Ohio State, Michigan, or both. That's no longer. The division's not. How weird would it be? Because we kept saying the divisional structure is what's keeping Penn State back. The 14 playoff is what's keeping Penn State back. And the year that both of those things go away, they probably, if they can win this game, would have won them both anyway, or gotten to the 14 playoff.
Well, there's another team,
the East.
Yeah. There's another team in the Big Ten East that was blocked too, right? And we
Indiana.
see it. So the thing that I think is interesting though, Andy, is a lot of people are negging Indiana because of that. Like when you talk about Indiana, you go, well, they were the beneficiary of a massive conference and avoiding the teams that are really, really good. And it's a way of kind of, invalidating what they've done this year. But at the same exact time, Penn State has been a similar beneficiary of their schedule so far. Now, Penn State's had to go on the road to USC. They've had to go on the road to Wisconsin. Those are two tough games that are tough to play back-to-back, and 3 in a row now with Ohio State. That's not an easy stretch. I'm just saying from who they've played so far this year, there isn't a beast that they've had to beaten that proves that they are unquestionably elite. So, I think we think that Penn State is really, really good and close to elite. They are number 3 in the polls. Like when you put Penn State number 3, that means you think they can beat anybody, in my opinion. I think we're going to find out a lot about how good Penn State is, because even if Ohio State plays a bad game or their offensive line issues, cause them to struggle, beating Ohio State under any circumstance by 1 or by 30 is a very wildly impressive win. And frankly speaking, the reason why he's their coach, that's what they expect. They don't expect to do it every year, but they expect for you to be able to rise up like you did in 2016 and do it once every 4 or 5. So I think if he is able to win this game and do it in a year, it's not just beating Ohio State, period. It's doing it in a year where you have a ton of expectations. I think that mega charges your goodwill with your fan base. And let's not forget, a lot of the fans at Penn State were upset when he got this guaranteed contract. It came at a time where I think a lot of fans there were ready for a change. So this is a very interesting lesson in forced patience, but it's also a very interesting lesson on what the actual expectations of the program are. So the expectation isn't to beat Ohio State every year, but it's to beat them in years like this.
Yeah. Now, if Ohio State goes in there and rolls or wins by 1, then we're right back to square one. So let's look at this through the lens of PrizePicks, because I'm interested in what's been projected for some of these players, because this is a difficult projection, this game. So if you haven't been playing PrizePicks, best daily fantasy game in America, download the app, use the code Staples, play $5, get $50 instantly. And the way it works is you pick squares. You pick at least 2. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. Each square has a stat category attached to a player. So we're looking at Jeremiah Smith right now. There's a couple squares for Jeremiah Smith in this game, the Ohio State receiver. 70.5 rushing yards. Do you think he'll go for more or less than that? And then Jeremiah Smith, 28.5 longest reception. Do you think it'll be longer or shorter than that? And Ari, the Ohio State offense is its own category. I mean, we can talk about Will Howard's projection, 230.5 passing yards. We can talk about Emeka Egbuka, 57.5 receiving yards. But the two backs, each one's about, I believe one is 51.5 and one is 50.5. This offense has got to get going somehow. The offensive line looked very bad against Nebraska. It wasn't just that they couldn't run the ball. It's that they didn't protect Will Howard very well. And we don't really know what the left tackle situation is going to be going into the game.
Yeah, I think I saw an update that they do not expect Zen Mikulski to play on Saturday, which means an entirely
Donovan Jackson
new,
would be your left tackle.
It's not just a new player that's going to be put into the mix. It's a new alignment. So they're going to have to work through that. But I think that we're at the point in Jeremiah Smith's career, Andy, where he's just going to get his in every game no matter what. That is a interesting number for a true freshman, 70. But if you go look at everything that he's done, he's been on or above that number in every single game that he plays. And it always feels like he has at least one 30-yard reception. I think that Ohio State could still lose if he hits both of these numbers, but I would anticipate that he would go more than. Now, the interesting one that you said there, and I don't know if we have a picture of it, so sorry for veering off, but like the Emeka Egbuka one, if it's in the 50s, like you said, if you go back and watch the Oregon tape, he was their number 1 targets recipient. And, we do like to take keys on, Andy, what teams do in close contested games against very good opponents, because I think that's how you find out who teams really are. When you're in a game that you could lose, who do you turn to? And they turned to him over and over and over in that game. And I think that is even more attractive than the Jeremiah Smith square to me.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because we don't have a square for Penn State's quarterback, because we don't know what the situation is going to be there, because it could be Drew Aller, who missed the second half of the Wisconsin game. It could be Bo Perbula, who came in for him. There were reports out of State College that Drew Aller was practicing yesterday and looked like he may be able to go. James Franklin has said he'd be a game time decision. And also, basically, James Franklin said, look, he's played enough football that if he feels ready to go, he can go. And so I'm leaning toward probably Aller here. But you just mentioned, what do you do in a closely contested game? Who's the person you target? Well, in their most closely contested game, the game where they fell behind on the road, had to come back and win in overtime, that was USC. Tyler Warren was the guy they targeted. Tyler Warren was the guy that Penn State leaned on. So his PrizePicks number is 54.5 yards in this game. I would think you probably need to see more than that. 21.5 is his longest reception number. I don't know if you need to see more than that, because they might force feed him like they did against USC. Because what do you have, 17 catches against USC?
Yeah, I look at the box score sometimes and just stare at it. Like when because I watched the game and I knew he touched the ball a lot while watching the game. And then I looked at the box score, because I think we were at OU Texas that day, right?
We were, yeah.
And so we didn't get to watch it, like every play of it. And I was just dumbfounded. You don't see that very often. And I look at the graph here, like in terms of production, it's like one thing does not belong here, but it was Penn State's biggest game. So, and it was the only game that was really in doubt, because like the score of the Illinois game looks close, but it wasn't close. The UCLA game was close for a half, but it wasn't really close. The USC game was the only game they could have lost. For sure. I don't know. They were losing at half. I didn't feel good at halftime of the Wisconsin game.
That's true. Okay, good point. Good point.
Because it turned out to, you're right that it turned out to be that way. But at halftime, with Drew Aller going out of the game early and then not returning.
It felt
down
pretty
3.
dark. You're right.
Like, I don't know if Wisconsin didn't throw that pick 6, if this would have been as big of a gap there in that game either. But, that's what good teams do, right? Like, when things are not going well, they force turnovers, they make impact plays, they change the trajectory of the game. That's what Penn State did. But like USC, like it really felt like they were going to lose even in the fourth quarter, and that wasn't the case at Wisconsin.
So if you're on PrizePicks, or even if you're just trying to figure out what's going to happen in this game, Tyler Warren, Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, like what are they doing? So Penn State's tight end, Ohio State's running backs, and Ohio State's running backs. We say them. We're more by extension talking about their offensive line and being able to open holes in the run game and play correct assignments. And because some of that stuff was mental stuff. It wasn't getting physically beaten in the Nebraska game. Sometimes it was, but sometimes it was mental stuff. So I'm very excited for this game, Ari. I cannot wait. We've complained about it all week. Wish it was a night game. Wish it was a whiteout. But at least we kick off our college football Saturday with a banger. So cannot wait for this.
I will not be taking my daughter to ballet on Saturday.
No, absolutely not.